that in our country there shall be no minority, there shall be no majority, there shall just be people.
Live from the SABC's Auckland Park headquarters, welcome to this week's first edition of The Watchdog, dedicated this evening to the memory of Stephen Bantu Biko, the founder of the Black Consciousness Movement in South Africa. He died on this day 45 years ago. The Watchdog starts now.
Any changes which are to come can only come as a result of a program worked out by black people. And for black people to be able to work out a program, they need to defeat the one main element in politics which was working against them, and this was a psychological feeling of inferiority.
A political activist, a prominent thinker, an author and founder of the Black Consciousness Movement in South Africa. Bantu Stephen Biko was born on the 18th of July 1946 in Ginsberg, a township near King Williamstown in the Eastern Cape. From a very early age, Biko demonstrated an insatiable appetite for knowledge. After completing school, he registered for a degree in medicine at the black section of the medical school of the University of Natal in 1966. Driven by the passion to revolutionize the way black people thought of themselves, he drew on the experiences and the approaches of other black thinkers before him, such as Frantz Fanon and Aimé Césaire, whom he quoted extensively in his writing. Biko believed the only way to effect fundamental change in apartheid South Africa would be for the oppressed people themselves to take the initiative and to work for their own liberation. Biko's ideas about being proud of being black became known as black consciousness.
We don't believe, for instance, in the so-called guarantees for minority rights, because guaranteeing minority rights implies the recognition of portions of the community on a race basis. We believe that in our country there shall be no minority, there shall be no majority, there shall just be people.
Banning orders were soon slapped on a number of people associated with the Black Consciousness Movement. Biko was then banned and restricted to King Williamstown. On the 18th of August 1977, Biko was arrested while traveling home from a political meeting in Cape Town with his friend Peter Jones. He was detained in Port Elizabeth for 26 days under the Terrorism Act. It was during this period that Biko sustained a massive brain hemorrhage. The police first claimed he had starved himself to death while on a hunger strike. It was only 20 years later that the police admitted before the TRC that they had killed Biko. The brutal circumstances of Biko's death caused a worldwide outcry, and he became a martyr and symbol of black resistance to the oppressive apartheid regime.
That insert by one of our colleagues, and that's producer Dumisho Mashaba. So, what was this philosophy that Biko espoused? And of what relevance is it in modern-day South Africa? 28 years into democracy, have we achieved any of the ideals that people like Biko fought and died for? Only some of the questions I hope our panelists for this evening will help answer. On the line, I have one of Biko's contemporaries, Professor Harry Nengwenkulu, a founder member of the South African Students Association, SASO, the organization Biko founded. Also on the line, I have Dr. Musibudi Mangena, a former president of the Azanian People's Organization, an organization largely seen as a successor to SASO, formed by Black Consciousness Movement adherents the year after Biko's passing. And with me in studio, I have Mr. Andile Mngxitama, not a Biko contemporary by any stretch, but someone who stood for Biko's ideas at a time when it wasn't popular to even talk about, let alone commemorate Biko. Good evening to all of you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, and also to the towers.
Let me start with you, Professor Nengwenkulu, if I may. Our professor hasn't joined us yet. Hopefully, once that line gets sorted, he will join us pretty soon. He seems to be having a network problem. I'm going to start with you, Andile, if I may. On a day like this, I mean, you've done this over the years. together with a few people, I won't go through the list right now, people who were inspired by Biko's ideas and who really kept him talking, so to speak, as you continue to remind people of what he stood for, the ideas he represented, and what some of us should be or could have done to really take those ideas forward. On a day like this, 45 years on, what's going through your mind?
Well, I woke up thinking about Biko as the martyr. I consider Biko so high that in the Christian faith, I would say it's Jesus Christ. And of course, we know that when he was captured, he was put naked in that van all the way from Port Elizabeth to Pretoria, shackled like Jesus, his body broken like Jesus. And he was clear that death is part of the process of liberation. And symbolically, it's important that the white establishment focused on Biko's head, the mind. When they brutalized him, we know that they hit his head, where the ideas are generated from. A young black person said to me a few years ago in the streets of Braamfontein, Mandela said, let us fight. They put him to jail. Biko said, let us think. They murdered him. Because ideas are that dangerous. And his ideas, of course, unfortunately, in the past almost 30 years of the ANC rule, have been undermined, have been disfigured, and are not the organizing philosophy of society. Because if we were black consciousness, we would not put black people in the conditions that we find themselves in today. We would have broken down the apartheid system. Biko's main intervention is to give us a framework of understanding what is the fight about, who is the enemy. And some of us who are dogmatic about Biko are still clear that when he said white racism is the problem and black solidarity is the solution, that is true. It is not, the ANC has not become the enemy. The ANC is a non-white group. It is just the bodyguards of the real enemy. And I think that's where some of myself and contemporaries of Biko differ, because they seem to elevate the ANC to the position of the enemy, and therefore making the political mistake of ending up supporting the white project. And let me warn now that in 2024, if we're not aware, not careful, if we don't unite as black people, we're going to have a white president of a racist party because of our rage and anger against the ANC, which is not organized in terms of thought. It's making us fight amongst ourselves and fight the ANC in ways which empowers the racist system. So Biko, I think, is very sharp, and he did warn that in South Africa, we could have a democracy where 30% of black people somehow will do well, but 70% will be excluded. And he said if white people were smart, they will bring that kind of democracy. And I think somebody like F.W. de Klerk, during those negotiations, he was sharp enough to organize a constitution that excludes us. That's why we're still landless. And the ANC has become the bodyguards of the real enemy. And I think if we can move in that direction, we can find each other and find a better solution than to empower the formerly oppressors.
Dr. Msibudi Mangena, you have had to, for many years in your life, carry Steve Biko's ideas forward as espoused by your organization, the Azanian People's Organization, and of course, previously also in your capacity as the leader of its armed wing in exile, you had to, carry the torch. 45 years down the line, what occupies your mind on a day like this?
It is painful. I've just landed this afternoon back in Polokwane after spending the whole weekend in Ginsberg with comrades and other members of the community, where on Friday we gathered at his place, the house that has now been declared a heritage site, where we slaughtered 2 cows and together with the family, just in the old, like we did in the olden days, communed together, talked about our plight as Black people, and gave thanks for his life, for his dedication, for his work, for his contribution to the work of liberation in this country. And then on Sunday, we had the commemoration of the day at the center building in his honor, which is a magnificent monument for his ideas, because that's a place where the community of Ginsberg, the children from kindergarten right up to university can go to that center and educate themselves, not just through the books that they got at school, but the library that is relevant, that has got the right ideas, and so on. And so in that commemoration yesterday, all manner of political and community of NGOs were present. ASAPO, the PAC, the EFF, they came together, the UDM, something that Andy was talking about there. We were all of one mind that it is important that Black solidarity should not just be the thing that we talk about. It is something that we should live, work, and clothe ourselves in if we are to get out of the present morass in which we are. And indeed, the ideas of solidarity that Steve talked about are now being trampled down by the present arrangement, where nothing goes right, where Black people are being misserviced. You go to any of our townships, sewage flows in the streets every other day. Refuse is not being removed. There is nothing that dehumanizes people than living in filth and in potholes that are only being found in places where we stay. And there is still the bucket system. 28 years after the attainment of so-called democracy, you go to the Free State, you go into the Eastern Cape and so on, Black people are still using the bucket system. The education system is not working. Health is not working. And it is us who are in charge, as Black people, that is, from the president right down to the teacher in the classroom, to the sweeper of the yard in the schools or the clinic and so on. And this can only mean that the people who are now in charge are overtaken by inferiority complex. They do not believe in their heart of hearts that Black people deserve better. They themselves hate themselves. They don't think that they can teach their own children, or that they can look after the health of their own people, or that they can keep the environment where the people live clean and hospitable. So we have got a big problem of the regression of the mentality, of the psyche of Black people, as opposed to the 70s, when we used to run around trying to overthrow the regime that was oppressing Black people in the manner that it was. So this past weekend was painful to me, because I used to go to Ginsberg so often, especially after his burning, where he was still organizing things all over the country from Ginsberg. Under the burning orders, he was still pulling the strings and ensuring that the struggle for freedom continues everywhere in the country. And so it was really painful, but I must say that what I saw yesterday and on Saturday and on Friday in Ginsberg has rejuvenated me. And I believe that as patriots of this country, we can stand up and do much better than what is happening now.
Professor Nengwangulu, there's a video doing the rounds today, well, from yesterday, on social media. And of course, with something you said after, well, it was long after Steve Biko was killed. I want you to take a listen, and I'm going to ask you then whether you still believe that's in fact what we're going to hear on this video is actually what happened and subsequently led to his death.
I think somebody sold us out. We don't know from which camp. It could have been from the BCM, could have been from the ANC, could have been from the PAC, could have been from anywhere. But certainly he was sold out because they set up that roadblock specifically for him. They sold up, and somebody phoned from Cape Town. He phoned from the Cape Town, and the phone was intercepted. They knew he was coming back, because otherwise they wouldn't have known that he had disappeared from Ginsberg in King Williamstown had somebody not told them. Divisions within the liberation movements are very important for them, for their survival. A united front spells the doom for them. So anybody involved in any attempts to mobilize all the black organization to come together and form a united front so they can prosecute the struggle as a single organization will always actually be considered enemy number one. And I think that's how they look at Steve Biko.
Do you still stick to what you said there, Prof?
Yeah. You see, the point that People Manana said, it's also confirmed what we're saying that, people are sold. I mean, the story that I've had about, movement of Steve Biko in Western Cape came from, Craig Williamson, because he had a detailed knowledge not only Steve movement, but also of people within the Black Conscious movement in the Western Cape fighting among themselves about girlfriend, boyfriend. My view was, he was white, and we didn't have whites within the Black Conscious movement, which would then mean that only people who could have that information could have been the police or the immigration that dealt with it. Then I found, one Pichana when he was at Cambridge, and I said, Craig Williamson could have been, boss or CIA, but essentially he was part of the system that was trying to undermine, Pichana is tried, love, when I went to Geneva the second time, we're having tea at 4 o'clock. Out of nowhere, I asked Craig Williamson, I'll show you another cop. Before he could respond, the wife of the director, the late Lars Gunnar Eriksson, said, no, he was a policeman before. For me, I believe that, once he was a cop, he was always a cop. So when I was asked, Craig Williamson came and asked me when I went to the office, how do you know that this is a cop? I said, it's not only me. I said, let people to tell you, you can't in the train with the overall. They will tell you that's a cop. I said, it's the survival instinct of the people. So that's part of the problem that we have within the struggle that we always have people who move and move out.
You don't think they would have done it anyway, Prof, because, the regime was brutal. Extrajudicial killings were their modus operandi. And for a man viewed to be as dangerous as he was, considering that he focused, as Andy Lemotama here was saying earlier, that he was about ideas. So anything, that the regime regarded to be very dangerous. So it was bound to happen, even if it didn't happen perhaps the way it eventually happened.
But you see, the gentleman who spoke earlier, he doesn't know. You see, Steve was, for me, and perhaps some of us were black, was killed precisely because me and Pichana were in exile, because we were having discussion on the ANC and the PAC. And there was an agreement with OR that perhaps one of the best things to do is to have Steve Biko come into exile temporarily. And we actually got a Dutch group that was considered very conservative in Germany, in Holland, to invite Steve Biko. And he's the one who has agreed to invite Steve Biko because we are going to carry on discussion with the ANC and the PAC for unity. And me and Pichana were trying to organize that Steve Biko should come in. And we suspect that, Craig Williamson, who was a member of the International University Exchange Fund in Switzerland, must have known this because we were in the office that we are all in. So for me, they try to prevent people from being the country. Yes, it's part of the destroying the people and the struggle. So it was not theoretical, it was practical that me and Pichano were trying to do that.
So it was about the unity of black people after all.
Yes, and it is painful today that the Black Consciousness movement and those of us who see Biko as the philosopher of liberation, our organizations are so divided. I mean, we have about 3 Black Consciousness organizations in this country. If Biko was about black solidarity, black unity, as the organizing thought to confront the white system, how is it that his followers have allowed themselves to be so fragmented? For me, the best tribute you can pay to Biko is for us to converge and become one solid foundation to confront the white system and to provide a program of liberation for our people. Because really, there's been a big reversal in terms of radical black consciousness ideas in the imagination of our people. Our people are at war with themselves. We are fighting people from outside South Africa. We are fighting for jobs. We have no consciousness as owners of this country, no consciousness as the people that must benefit from the means of production, which are still held by white minority. So for me, the best tribute you can pay Biko is to get together, stand on the same side as black people, and articulate a program of liberation so that Biko's ideas can manifest in the actual changed life of our people. We're still landless, 28 years. We are landless in our own country. Look at management structures. It is still highly white. Look at the JSE. Black people own only about 3% of JSE. So the program of the ANC itself, de facto, is anti-black. And unless we inject black consciousness into the state structure, we're going to continue to see the degradation of the lives of our people.
Dr. Mangena, let's start with those who are in the black consciousness fold. How did it happen that we ended up with AZAPO, SOPA, Black People's Convention, from all the people who, and if you look at some of the people who led these organizations, they were the people who came out of prison in 1977, 78, and then many of them then got to form the Azanian People's Organization, and then of course a couple of decades later ended up where they are or have been today. Fill us in. What actually happened, or what is your reading of what actually happened, where you had ended up with people like Laibon Mabasa being where they were, the late Nkosi Molala going to form the BPC and so on?
I don't think they can tell you, but I can tell you what the real reasons were, because from where I'm sitting, there were no reasons. We are children of the same womb. And ideologically, politically, in terms of policies and so on, we were at one. What was keeping us apart, I can't tell you, and I can tell you that I was at the center of all those negotiations and discussions for several years. It is now probably something like 18 years of those kind of discussions. I can't give you a principle or a political position that kept us apart. But there is one thing that you need to understand, and it is that people do change. People are affected by various things. There are many people who were with us in SASO, in the BPC, who crossed over to go and join the ANC or the PAC, or even, I don't know if some of them joined the unity movement, but others left and became apolitical. So people do change with the changing of times, but it should not hold us back. And that in as far as the advancement of the struggle is concerned, that any one of us who has ever been involved in a struggle, especially say armed struggle, for example, I've led an army, and you train cadres and they become expert, but then when they come into the country, they defect. Some of them defect to the enemy, and some of them just disappear. Some of them are change when they are change sides when they are tortured and so on. So these things, some people are offered money and it changes their political stand. Some of them have linkages that then influence them to change the position that they have held. But as far as I know, all of them remain Black consciousness and socialist in orientation. And it is the different organizations should not be looked at as prisons in which people cannot cross from one to the other. It should be possible for people to do so. If we insist that people should not do so, I think we will be putting ourselves in a straitjacket from which we will never escape. And as I indicate, there are many who have crossed the political line. Comrade Nengwe Kulu was talking about the work that we did with people like Comrade Bani Picha. But he did cross to the ANC. He did cross to maybe I might be mistaken, to COPE or whatever the case might be. But he doesn't remain less of a patriot that is not interested in getting this country right. So let us not nitpick on things that are not advancing the struggle of our people to be free. But we should be dedicated and determined to ensure that in action we go forward. And as I say, yesterday with the trade unions, with civil society organizations, with the EFF, with the PAC, and so on, we're saying we are marching forward. And so let us look forward to liberate our people from the present morass in which they find themselves at present.
And that's exactly what we're going to do, in the next half of the show. But before we get there, Prof, fill us in there, because you can't leave that hanging. What then happened to that project, which you say is what you and people like Bani Pityana were busy with when Steve Biko died? What happened to that project of bringing the various components of the broad mass liberation movement together?
You see, one of the things that I must start with, SASO was never formed as an anti-ANC or PAC. SASO, when we formed it, we have formed it in order to continue the struggle that was fought by African Kingdom, the ANC and the PAC. Hence, we maintained the relationship. When I went to exile, my job was to try to have discussion with the ANC, my contact with the former President Mbeki, and also and the PAC, David Sibeko, with me on that kind of discussion. That was the idea that we had. Secondly, black consciousness was never an organization. It was a philosophical and ideological issue. So anybody could move away in and out that we have. So they do some of the things that we should make the correction that we have. When we try to continue to build that, bring Steve Biko out, because we reached a stage where we felt that we needed to come out and then not come as a refugee, to come at Makhanda. That's why we have organized a Dutch group inviting, they agreed to invite him, so that he should come out. We'll continue the discussion that was started with the ANC and PAC. The PAC did create some problem in Dar es Salaam because they were very splintered. But David Sibeko was our main contact. In the ANC, my main contact was Mr. Mbeki, the former president. That's what we discussed. So when Pichanda came to exile, he stayed with me in Ghana for 6 months before he went to Cambridge. That was the idea, because we didn't see the struggle to be fought by splintered groups. We thought we were part of that and so on. I met the Subuga in Kimberley. I spent about a week there to discuss with him that we had. That is the discussion that we're going to have. So the thing stopped because when Steve then killed, disrupted the process of when Steve Biko coming to exile to continue the further discussion, the ANC and OR Tambo, and the leadership of the ANC and the PAC.
With the benefit of hindsight, knowing what you know now, do you think it was an idea whose time had come? Would it have happened?
You mean the time of meeting with the ANC and
Yes.
PAC? We thought it was compulsory because I was to get the constitution, the SASO, right from the beginning. We got when I was a chaplain, because we started speaking before, we started even met before. Me and the judge in Civil, who was the judge president of the Free State, were chaplain. We managed to get somebody in Soweto, Osayo, who was the ANC, to give us the former constitution, the PAC and ANC at Forte. So right from the beginning, even some of us went before we formed SASO, because we started discussing SASO in 1968, and then we formed in 1969. The idea was that we must bring black people together to fight the struggle and come the struggle that was fought by so many people before. We disregarded some of the Bantu states who were in there. And we then avoided, even at the beginning, to attack Chief Butelete because we thought he had some support. So we attacked the Bantu state contracts rather than individual until, Kemba Sono went for and then started attacking. So we changed our policy. So our policy from the beginning was that the ANC, we were not a political party. The political party came with the Black People's Convention. Even then, we were not completely agreed as a group. But because we had this unity, we then decided to form it. But we then felt that, we are young people who must get adults. That's why people like, Drake Walker became the Secretary General. We didn't take any position within the Black People's Convention that we had. Because adults to deal with adults. We were students who supported us, the public servant, but they saw us as young people. So we could not get into the political part, although we have an influence within that.
If you've joined us, you're looking at the life and times of Stephen Bantu Biko on the anniversary, 45th anniversary of his death. And up next, we're going to look at what the philosophy he stood for actually meant. What was that philosophy that Biko espoused? And of what relevance is it in modern day South Africa? 28 years into democracy, have we achieved any of the ideals that Steve Biko fought and died for? That's coming up after this show. Welcome back, and if you've just joined us, we're looking at the life, times and legacy of Stephen Bantu Biko, who died on this day 45 years ago. And the question we're going to be looking at next is what exactly was the philosophy that Steve Biko preached, and of what relevance is it to all of us today, 28 years into democracy, have we achieved any of the ideals that Steve Biko fought for? Now, a short while ago, Professor Janine Ntihirangenza delivered this year's Steve Biko Memorial Lecture under the theme, Building Bridges Among the Wretched of the Earth. Professor Ntihirangenza is the founding director of the Center for Genocide and Human Rights in Africa and the Diaspora at Northeastern Illinois University. She began by reminding us how Biko still lives in us and among us.
Biko lives building the bridges among the wretched of the earth. The wretched of the earth, Frantz Fanon's words. Who are we? When I ask myself, who am I? Am I allowed to go all the way to answer the questions without anybody blocking me? Who am I? Am I able to find myself out there? Am I able to find myself here, there, yesterday, tomorrow? Am I? Who am I? Stephen Bantu Biko got us there. Have we picked up from where he left off? Would we say, as the wonderful poet said, would we be proud to say we made it? I don't think so.
Well, would we? Would Biko be proud of what he sees if he was around us or among us today? Well, in addressing this year's theme, that lecture, Professor Ntihirangenza tackled this thought-provoking question. Take a listen again.
Biko lives. Two words slashed across a ghetto wall, a phrase that haunts the nights of South Africa's rulers. Reactionaries and opportunists of every stripe hope and pray that it will disappear under a rain of blood and the whitewash of reform. But it remains bold and powerful, not a tired and worn-out slogan, but a battle cry of a generation whose hopes and aspirations are for revolution and the end of all exploitation and oppression. End of quote. So how do we end all exploitation and oppression? The answer is we build bridges.
Would Biko be proud first to wake up, look at everything that has happened?
Not at all. In fact, Biko's dream has become a nightmare because, as your fellow panelists have been saying, the conditions of black people are actually deteriorating further.
Whose fault is it?
Of course, the fault is of the ruling party, primarily. And we need to understand that why it is doing that. Firstly, it does not have the same philosophy of black consciousness would have put black people first, put the dignity of black people first. The ruling party has become a government of non-whites. You know, Steve Biko at the time characterized the homeland leaders as non-whites who were basically there as a buffer zone between black people's liberation and the white system. The ANC has become that government. In fact, South Africa is a Bantustan, where blacks are put in the corner, neglected. I mean, look at our hospitals, look at our schools, look at where we live. The ANC does not have the concept of liberation that puts black people first. And that comes from black consciousness. That is why I am so impatient with the loose talk of black consciousness as some kind of amorphous thought process which permeates here and there, and everybody somehow on this day we come and we think about Biko and then we go home. We don't think of black consciousness as an organizing revolutionary thought that brings together a political revolutionary program to confront the white system which is protected by the ANC. I don't hear this kind of talk from the black consciousness adherents. We talk very loosely about unity, about some kind of little things which are happening here and there. Where is the revolutionary program which is driven by black consciousness and a socialist orientated program? It does not exist. What we have is fragmentation and loose talk, an occasional coming together to commemorate Biko. I think we are insulting Biko, by the way. This kind of thinking about Biko on Biko Day in September, it has become the best way to forget about Biko, because we do nothing with these ideas to build a revolutionary movement. Biko was a revolutionary black power philosopher. And if we don't organize for political power, we are not going to be able to achieve any change for black people.
Dr. Mangena, if indeed, I mean, the governing party is to blame for the condition that you also described, you know, is it for lack of trying on their part? And I'm not asking this because unlike the three of us, you do have a bit of that benefit of having been in government for a bit.
Yes, black people are all our people in this country. It isn't only the people who belong to Azapo or belong to the Black Consciousness Unity or whatever the case might be. Black people are all the people in this country that, and Steve and all of us who started this movement regarded them as such, that all of us. And indeed, we are in a perilous state. And most of it is because we have lost consciousness and we have regressed, as I said earlier. You know, it is under our watch that our languages are dying now. And languages are intertwined with our culture. What the culture that rules supreme in this country now is white culture, not our own. And you walk into any bookshop in this country, you won't find books in any of our languages. There are no publishers publishing in all of our 9 languages or more of them that exist in this country. You won't find our cuisine anywhere. And if you've got to find something to wear, it is rare. You won't find it. It's not commonplace. It is not as if we are the majority in this country. So we have got a situation where we are slipping down in almost every sphere of life, including the education of our children who don't understand our languages and our culture anymore. Children who, when they go into the villages, they will close their ears and so, or their noses when mohodi is being cooked and so on. They can't even name it. And we are here and talking about black consciousness as though it is something that is divorced from the very living, the very lives of our people on a day-to-day basis. So there is a problem, and if we say that the ANC is responsible, where are we? Where are we? Do we let them do so? What are we doing? And if all we do is to splinter and nitpick about small things when what I'm talking about now is happening, when we are losing ourselves and our children don't understand what we are talking about, what is it that we are doing? So I'm saying that the agenda is very big. And if we are going to say it is just the responsibility of one political party, the ANC is not black people. The ANC is not Azania. It is not. And so if we are going to sit here and say, well, the ANC does all these things, where are we? What are we doing about that particular situation? So I'm saying, let black people recognize the plight in which they are. They are poor, they've got nothing, they have no land, the economy of the country is still in white hands, and it is up to them to fight to ensure that they get their land back and that the ownership patterns of the economy changes so radically that it reflects at least the demographics of our country. In terms of ownership, not just being appointed to some board or manage something, but to own the economy of this country. We need to do that for our children and for future generations.
Dr. Nangwangulu, both Mr. Mnatama and Dr. Mangena are taking us back to where we should have started. And back in 1971, when you formed SASO, you said, and this is from the papers that were before the court, that were Seth Cooper and others, and 8 others actually appeared. And there were 5 points. Black consciousness is an attitude of mind, a way of life. The basic tenet of black consciousness is that the black man must reject all value systems that seek to make him a foreigner in the country of his birth and reduce his basic human dignity. The black man must build up his own value systems, see himself as self-defined and not defined by others. The concept of black consciousness implies the awareness by the black people of power they wield as a group, both economically and politically, and hence group cohesion and solidarity are important facets of black consciousness. Black consciousness will always be enhanced by the totality of involvement of the oppressed people. Hence the message of black consciousness has to be spread to reach all sections of the black community. This is the policy manifesto that you adopted back in 1971. Fast forward to 2022. What does this mean on the back of what we've experienced? Everything that has happened in the run-up to 1994 and what have we ever experienced over the past 28 years?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're missing, we were fighting, and I think we're still fighting today, 2 struggles. We fought the struggle against the ruling party, the National Party, in the political apartheid. But we were also fighting the liberals who took the leadership with the struggle for black people. They're still taking it in today. That's why from the beginning, SASO did not attack the National Party, because we knew that everybody knew that they actually were the one who carried the shambok. We attacked the liberals because they took control of the struggle. When we wanted, they said, no, don't use violence, when others were using violence. No, even as late in 1971, when we called ourselves black, we didn't start calling ourselves black until 1971 July. If you check our constitution, the first one, we call ourselves a non-what. Our problem was that, you don't call a donkey a non-horse or a horse non-donkey. It's a donkey. Why should we be called that name? So we started in 1971 to call ourselves black, and the black consciousness is the political party. But we had a problem. Even 1971, when the late Alan Paton was in London, was said, perhaps there's something good about apartheid. Still people responded that Mr. Alan Paton, at whose cost, should do experiment all this. So we had these 2 struggles. The third part that we have, which is even today, is the economic system. I never heard anybody criticize the economic system. You can't just free people politically, but you must also change the economic system. Some of the people who talk about revolution, they also want to carry with the capitalist system that denies the people to own land, to earn useful salaries. Wherefore, this type of problem, the issue of black consciousness was supposed to be a unifying force. The point that you read, that you have, it did not mean that everybody must necessarily be a member of SASO. People can do the same thing in a different place altogether. So I think the struggle should continue. In a way, we have gone a long way in 28 years, 26 years that we have. That we can debate these issues there, which we could not do in 1971. It means that there has been an advance in terms of liberating ourselves, or taking a step forward in order to pursue our own struggle for liberation.
Well, Andile, you have a task. I believe there's someone who is asking you, like who's watching the program, who feels there's something you need to do. Andile must consider to revive the Steve Biko literature and advocate for it to be part of the education from primary schools. Just listening to him speak, it gives us that a black consciousness motivation. Thank you, Andile, from Romeo Machila. Are you up to the task?
Absolutely. We have to do that. We owe it to ourselves and our children. The ideas of Steve Biko have to be as popular as, you know, the Bible, if you like. Every household must have that book of Steve Biko, I Write What I Like. In fact, every Sunday evening, we as families must go and pick up a chapter and discuss amongst ourselves, because Biko is such a great gift, such a clear mind that help us to be able to think consistently about our position and to bring blackness back to ourselves. Without Biko, I can't see how we can get out of the situation we find ourselves in.
Well, 45 years after his death, the family of Steve Biko, but also families of other freedom fighters were killed by apartheid security forces, continue to lament the slow pace of prosecutions in relation to those crimes. Last year, Nkosinathi Biko, the son of Steve Biko, was on this show and expressed hope that with the revisiting of apartheid-era crimes and steps being taken by the NPA to enable effective prosecutions, justice will finally be served. Take a listen to what he had to say.
It was more than a case of a lack of political will. It talks about political interference. And that is a serious matter. And so to go back to the question that you asked my fellow panelists, we cannot be excited yet about the NPA. This is the beginning of what is a long road for the NPA to extract itself out of embeddedness in the political agendas of the ruling elite and find its wings based on the Constitution, as is confirmed by the judgment of the SCA. So this is the beginning. And certainly it is a part of our efforts to ensure that it awakens to its responsibility. What we are excited about, Vuyo, I can tell you for sure, is that the SCA judgment is one more layer, and combined with the judgment by Mushidi, Kolapen, and others in the court before it, and Judge Montle, we now have a serious cohort of cases to provide us with guidance about what needs to happen with the likes of Rodriguez. We were not here in 2017. There was a lot of ambiguity. And I think we now have case law that provides a very firm foundation for us in the way forward.
After so many years, we're still waiting for those that were responsible for Steve Biko and other heroes' deaths to be brought to book. Let me thank my panelists for this evening. Professor Harry Nengungulu, a founder member of SASO, the organization Biko founded. Also, Dr. Musibudi Mangena, a former president of the Azanian People's Organization, an organization largely seen as a successor to SASO, formed by Black consciousness adherents the year after Biko's passing. And with me in the studio was Andile Mnatama, not a Biko contemporary, but someone who stood for Biko's ideas at a time when it wasn't popular in this country to talk about him. And that's our program for tonight. Do join us again tomorrow evening, same time. Have a good night.